the ICS Wednesday seminar. Thank you for joining us. The topic of discussion is extremely relevant to our present times when the entire world is trying to combat the pandemic and each one of us is affected by it. It is on global vaccine supply and its distribution with the focus on India and China. It was a pleasure to put together this panel with Professor Rama Baru, who will be chairing the session. She does not need an introduction. She's professor at the Center of Social Medicine, Community Health at JNU and an honorary fellow at the ICS. We are joined by an expert panel and we couldn't have had a better mix of speakers. Their detailed bios are given in the invite, but I'll briefly introduce them. Ms. Sujata Rao is a former Union Secretary of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. She has occupied several important positions that include the Global Fund for HIV/AIDS, TB, and Malaria, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Public Health Foundation of India. Professor Biswajit Dhar is Professor, Center for Economic Studies and Planning, School of Social Sciences, JNU. He was the Director of Research and Information Systems for developing countries and also the Professor and Head of the Center for WTO Studies in the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. The next and final panelist is Mr. E. Kumar Sharma, who is the Deputy Editor of Financial Express, the Indian Express Group. Earlier, he was Senior Editor, Business Today, the India Today Group. So I welcome all three of you. Thank you so much. And I invite Professor Baru to chair the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nandi, Ambassador Kant, and all the senior faculty at the Institute of Chinese Studies. It's indeed an extremely topical area of engagement, both in terms of us and the world dealing with the COVID pandemic, and more importantly, in the lack of any serious therapeutic intervention. The role of the vaccine has become extremely important in actually reducing the severity of disease and not necessarily preventing infection. The important storyline here for today's seminar is really to understand the COVID vaccine as a global project, and there are many elements to it which are extremely important. The major vaccine producers in the world are China, India, US, EU, and Russia, in that order. And it's very interesting that the entire debate today is one of the nations that have been able to balance their domestic needs with their export commitments. I'm just going to share very briefly some statistics. Of million doses, China, 58% of the doses were used for domestic purposes and 42% were exported. In the US, 99% of the doses was used for domestic purposes and 1% was exported. In the EU, 72% was for domestic consumption and 28% were exported. And in India, 35% of doses were used for domestic consumption and 65% for export. So you find that if you contrast China and India, China produces the largest quantum of doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. And what is very interesting is that they have been able to balance their domestic needs with their exports. I'm not going to go into great length about the India story. You will hear about it from our panelists. And it is also important to understand two very important concepts in this whole global vaccine story. One is a vaccine nationalism, which is being seen clearly in the way in which the US and EU has behaved, and the rather limited ability of the WHO through its COVAX to bring in the issue of vaccine equity on center stage. And within nations, we also have the issue of both vaccine nationalism and also vaccine equity. With this very brief introduction, I now request Biswajit Dhar to please speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Rama, Ambassador Ashok Khan, uh, my fellow panelists, Ms. Sujata Rao and uh, Mr. Kumar from Financial Express. A bit of a throat problem. It's a pleasure to be back discussing this issue we had first discussed on 10th of March. I just noted the date. And since 10th of March, a lot has actually happened on the this particular issue that Rama had briefly flagged in terms of where we stand vis-a-vis the global demand supply situation of vaccines. And as we have been repeatedly been reminded by experts and including the WHO, that everyone needs to be vaccinated before we can feel that we are getting somewhere around this pandemic. Now, like Rama did, I also would like to preface my comments by a few numbers. I was looking at some of the numbers that are available in public domain, which actually tell us a story about the inequity that is there in the global vaccine, the COVID vaccine situation. If you look at the top end of the spectrum, countries who are doing rather well in terms of covering their population, find that about 70 countries have been able to vaccinate or provide one dose of vaccine to 20% or more of their populations. Most of the countries in the developed world have, except Japan, are in this category, although OECD countries are in this category. And many of these countries, US and all, have been able to provide one dose of vaccine to more than 50% of their population. So they have this target of covering nearly the entire population by the end of the year. On the other end of the spectrum are, and this is the numbers, there are a number of countries for which no figures are available. There are 62 countries which have been able to provide vaccines to 5% or first dose of vaccine to 5% or less of their population. And most of these countries are low and low middle income countries. And several of them in Africa and in parts of Asia. Rama talked about the extent of vaccine nationalism that there is in the West, and looking at this particular problem, a lot was expected from the G7 countries when they met a few weeks back. The G7 countries, as you all know, pledged to provide about 1 billion doses of vaccine to the low income and low middle income countries over the next 1 year. And many experts, including from the WHO, have said that this is far below the 11 billion doses that are needed for these countries. So you can see the extent to which many of these Western countries are pulling themselves back. In US, you are now hearing reports of excess supplies in some states, but yet this is the situation that we are witnessing. Kind of huge inequity in vaccine supplies, almost matching the overall inequity that we find in terms of resources and incomes in the world. Now, in order to sort of get over this problem of vaccine availability and vaccine and other COVID-related medical products availability, many of you will remember that India and South Africa had proposed in the WTO that access to technologies for producing these products freely should be facilitated through a waiver of all the intellectual property rights, several forms of intellectual property rights. And this proposal was made last year in October, early October last year. So this is the famous waiver proposal, which has now been supported by, or rather, it's been co-sponsored by 61 countries, including two major groups, the LDC group and the African group. The 61 countries supporting it, and almost 2/3, 61 countries have co-sponsored it, and almost 2/3 of the members are supporting this proposal. Now, it's interesting that it's not only that the vaccine nationalism is plaguing or it's causing the supply shortages. It also is the attitude of many of these countries, the advanced countries, which is coming in the way of spreading the production facilities over a large number of countries and to sort of augment supplies of vaccines, therefore. So in this, in the discussion, the WTO has shown till now that most of these industrialized countries are putting their foot on the door. They're not allowing this discussion to take place the way it should, facilitate an early discussion. US came around and supported the waiver proposal only as far as vaccines are concerned. But we know that there is a long road ahead of us. We need the medicines as well. But US has at least allowed the logjam to get broken. One or two other countries have joined in from the naysayers group. But then there are many other countries like the European Union is divided, right to the middle. Then you have Switzerland. Many of these countries who are home to the major pharma companies. They are actually, sort of responding to the calls of their big pharma in their attempts not to, provide technology to countries so that vaccine production can be facilitated. So now the situation is that there is going to be discussion. There is going to be negotiations on this issue, and what we call text-based negotiations. So all kinds of language is going to be thrown in by all the members of the WTO. And many of us who have actually done these text-based negotiations in WTO and other forums, we know to what extent these negotiations can go. We had that very bitter experience in the HIV/AIDS, during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, where a similar issue was being discussed in the WTO, and the negotiations took more than 2 years to complete, and we had that Doha Declaration on TRIPS and public health. So the short point is that the access to technologies that can actually facilitate, or facilitate ramping up of vaccine and production of medicines and other medical products isn't going to be very easy. So what we are looking down, the next several months is a continuation of this situation. Now, the interesting part of this, the story in the WTO is that the two countries Rama mentioned was in the list of the top vaccine producers, China and Russia, both have come out in support of the waiver proposal. So China, despite its sort of excellence in this area, and it's is clearly looking to dominate the vaccine market. I just read a report in the Reuters a few days back that Sinopharm has a capacity to provide more than 1 billion vaccine doses to the world beyond China in the second half of this year, and the other companies are also ramping up their production. So I think it's a very interesting situation that China is is with the developing countries. There was a lot of apprehension as to how China is going to behave, because when the HIV/AIDS issue was there, China was more of a typical developing country, which was actually looking for technology. But today, China is not in that bracket. You can't bracket China in the countries, many other developing countries who still need the technology to move forward. But yet there is a kind of a vaccine solidarity that we are seeing among developing countries, and a kind of forces that we are expecting from the major emerging economies, from the BRICS countries. We can at least see in case of China, Russia, India, and South Africa. This is happening. Brazil, unfortunately, has become an outlier. So one expects that this discussion, the takes place negotiations, which are likely to commence in the third week of July in the WTO, will lead to an early conclusion or early decision, so that before it's too late for the world to really tackle this pandemic, we can come to grips with the problem. The other issue, finally, I'll just take 1 minute, Rama, before I conclude. I would also say that we hark back to the achievement of 2 decades back in the Doha Declaration, where we won a major victory in providing ourselves with the flexibility to use compulsory licensing, when in case of public health emergencies, or is the kind of situation we have today. So if today it's what we're facing today is not a public health emergency, what will be? I think that one is to remember. So quite apart from the international sort of process that is on, I think we need to sort of use the facility that was provided to us 2 decades back in the Doha Declaration, which said that the countries are free to use compulsory license to address the problems of the kind we are facing today. And countries like India, which have the possibility of ramping up production very easily, shouldn't hesitate to use compulsory license. I don't know, there's a lot of hesitation today. We are finding that the government is not really keen to use compulsory license. So I think all hands should be on the deck as we approach this issue, and this would provide, when India is taking a lead in providing compulsory license, actually provide the cue to many other countries like Bangladesh and others who have, the pharmaceutical industry which is up and running. So, so this is the politics that is now playing out as we are seeing. Frankly, on my my own assessment is that we are not going to get a really a facility from the WTO which allows us to use or get access to the technology as easily. I think this will be whatever decision comes will be laced with a lot of caveats and a lot of conditions. So we need to wait and watch what happens. But I would be cautiously optimistic about what transpires in the WTO. Thank you very much, Rama, and thank you, ICS and Ambassador Kant and other the senior faculty for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Biswajit. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Sujata Rao.
Thank you, Rama, and thank you, Mr. Kant and his colleagues from ICS for inviting me this afternoon. Rama has asked me to give an overview of the vaccine policy in India within the context of vaccine inequity. So I'll try and make a quick attempt because I think I have 10 minutes. Well, as you all know, India has been a very important manufacturer of vaccines. We have capacity to manufacture at least about 1.7 to 2 billion doses a year, of which we use domestically about 1 billion doses for our childhood vaccines, and about 700 million doses is what we export every year, and it's increasing. And we have about 18 state-of-the-art manufacturing companies, which are very good, and it's a very, very competitive environment. So this is our strength. Our manufacturing costs are much lower. We have excellent ability to do clinical trials at a fraction of a cost than what is done in the United States. So we have very skilled manpower. So all these make India quite an attractive destination for the growth of vaccine manufacture in India. And globally, we, along with Sanofi and GSK, both Serum, BB, and Afkin produce about 60% of the children's vaccine, which UNICEF and Gavi get from us. So in volume, we manufacture 60% of global need, but in terms of money, it is all the vaccine companies that are located, Merck, Sanofi, GSK, Pfizer, all located in the Western countries that account for 90% of the money in the global vaccine market. So it's a very contrary to impression, though we may be having a lot of contribution to the childhood vaccines. In the influenza vaccine market, our role is a little relatively low, but nevertheless, we have the capacity and we certainly can do a lot. Now in December, let's start the story with December end, which was a watershed of sorts. That was when India had got through the wave 1. And by December, our caseloads came down to less than 20,000 with marginal or minimal deaths. That was the time when the United States and other countries had almost by then cornered all the vaccine by the advance purchase agreements. In fact, US started in May 2020 with investing heavily with Moderna and also gave support to Pfizer. So vaccine was a very important part of their strategy to combat this virus. And between them and UK and EU and so on, the high income countries had already got 51% of the global vaccine, COVID vaccine available and secured their supply. So the rest of it, and they only constituted 14% of the world's population. So the rest of the 84% of the population was left with the remaining vaccine that was being manufactured. Now in this again, if you notice, 1% of the caseloads with Japan, Australia, and Canada accounted for, almost hoarded 1 billion doses of the vaccine. America took 800 million doses, 4 times or 2 times more than what they need. But Canada has more than 4 times their requirement of vaccine. So they really did smart purchasing from their point of view. They did enough stocking, and they did this hoarding only because they were aware that the virus may mutate or may change. So we better have these strong vaccines stocks with us because we don't know what the future looks like. Now, India also took a serious view of vaccine because that was also seen as one of our important pillars for prevention. And we started a journey as early as in July. If you remember, July 2nd, DG ICMR wrote a letter to all the clinical trial agents, partners, that they better speed up the phase 3 trials because he would like to have a vaccine ready for public use in 6 weeks' time, by August 15th. Of course, then he had to redact that letter. But what I mean is that there was that concern that we should come up with our own vaccine very quickly. And therefore, Bharat, ICMR got into active relationship with Bharat Biotech. The strain was given from NIV Pune. All the phase 3 clinical sites were provided by the government medical colleges and so on. about 46 crores was given to them as support from ICMR. Now, I don't know, I haven't seen the contract to say to what extent ICMR and government have a stake in their patent, but nevertheless, it was a product manufactured by Indian scientists and in India by an Indian company, though the adjuvant is imported and many components that go into making the final product is all imported again. But then that's a part of the global supply chain that, you know, that I think should be there and should be followed up. I don't believe in complete closing doors and manufacturing every cog, every little nut and bolt only within the country. So anyway, so that was one. And the next vaccine manufacturer was SII, that is the Serum India International. They took the AstraZeneca vaccine, which had already done their phase 3 trials abroad. They only had to do bridging trials of 1,600 people. And they were manufacturing the vaccine. They bought the vaccine from AstraZeneca and they were manufacturing it in India. Now, Serum has one of the largest capacities for vaccine manufacturing in the world, not India, in the world. It can manufacture almost 1.7 billion doses if it really wants. It has that capacity. So it is a very big company, and they were very much into it. If you remember, right in September, October, Adar Poonawalla gave a lot of TV interviews where he said he already had a stockpile of 50 million doses and 80 million doses and so on. But AstraZeneca had its own controversies because they were still going through the phase 3 trials. And so it was a bit delayed. Now, on December 4th, Pfizer, which had finished its phase 3 and also done 2 rounds of its phase 4 trials, that is really for safety and seeing in real life conditions, they got an emergency authorization from UK. That was the first country which gave Pfizer the emergency authorization, and US followed suit. So Pfizer then applied to India, our DCGI, for an emergency authorization also. When they heard Pfizer had come, immediately both Bharat Biotech and SSI, Serum Institute, also rushed to the drug controller saying, we also want an emergency authorization. Now, it is here that, call it bad decision, miscalculation, or a wrong, I mean, it's a mistake. I don't see any conspiracies here, where the DCGI insisted that Pfizer will have to do the bridging study, because as per our drug laws, any company that is a foreign company coming with the vaccine and wanting to sell in India has to do a bridging study. In my time, when I was secretary, used to have a sample size, we used to insist of 500. Now it is about 1,600 is what they have laid down. And that's called a bridging study, just to see, because the genetic composition of our population is so different and diverse to what is available in the West. And that's why these are only to ensure safety of the product before a license is given. So the SII was to do the bridging study for which clearance had been given. And Bharat Biotech was still in the process of doing their phase 3 trials. As you read from the papers, it's now middle of June, end of June, and they still have yet to submit their report. I mean, that's how delayed the whole thing is. So they applied, and on January 3rd, the drug controller gave them the permission. And on January 16th, the first dose was administered to an Indian. Now, the problem this raised so much of controversy, because truly, even I agree that though I really do believe, because I have seen these vaccine companies very closely in my earlier job, Bharat Biotech by no stretch of imagination is a substandard company. It's an excellent company, there's no doubt about it, and they're very rigorous in their quality. I have no doubts. But yet, once there is a process that you have to go through phase 3 trials, clinical trials have to be done for an invasive thing like vaccine, that must be honored and adhered to. So there was a lot of controversy on what grounds was Bharat Biotech given this permission when they have not as yet done their efficacy trials. And I believe that was a good objection. And if the government had compulsions, they should have come out clean. But that did contribute in a large way for vaccine hesitancy. I mean, I myself, with all my knowledge of the company, and I know that it is safe, I know I won't die. Even I was hesitant to say if I was offered a Covaxin, I would take it. So that was the mood. But it was also alongside was the mood, if you all remember, where each one of us felt we'd gotten over the pandemic. There was a complacency, and India, I believe strongly that they probably fell into the trap a bit too seriously and felt that these two companies were good enough, because Sputnik came in February and filed for an emergency authorization, which was put on hold and not given permission for a long time. So we never really were proactive with negotiating with any advance purchase agreements with any of the foreign companies on the one hand, nor did we do any advance purchase blocking of these two companies either. The order placed, we need 1.8 billion, I mean, for the population, 1.8 billion doses. At that time, they were only thinking of healthcare workers and health providers and so on. Even then, we ordered, the first order with PM Cares was about 110 million doses, of which also we very gladly parted with 66 million for two reasons. The newspapers, because I have no knowledge, that it was really vaccine diplomacy to beat out China from there, getting the goodwill around the neighbors. And so there was a bit of this competition with China to do this vaccine diplomacy. And then they also gave Covaxin, the share of India's share was given to them. And they made a good neighborly diplomacy by giving 10 million doses as grant to all the neighbors, which I think is a good thing. I mean, Bhutan and company don't have any manufacturing, and the requirement is so small. So that was how 66 million doses went off. And out of the, again, another 100 million, given 200 million doses, we were doing the vaccination. Now, the problem that came in was that we never really took this vaccine supply position, the supply equation of the side of the supply demand equation was, I don't think, ever very closely looked at. We just knew these were two top of the line companies. They're good enough to meet our requirements, and we have enough time on our hands. And so therefore they were not really following it up as closely as they should have, which surprises me, because the first thing you do when you're expanding your eligibility criteria, which is what was happening from healthcare providers, it went to frontline workers. Then they said all the elderly above 60 years old. And on February 1st, they said all those above 45, but with comorbidities on 1st March. So they were constantly expanding the eligibility criteria, but they were not expanding, they were not looking at the supply side. And then they came up with this target that 300 million people would be vaccinated by July end. But how? Where's the 300 million vaccines? Did you see the production capacity of Bharat Biotech? Have you examined the production capacity of SII? No. So therefore, you know, this was the situation, because SII was giving hardly 50 million doses a month, and Bharat Biotech had less than 10 million doses capacity at the time. In fact, they were just about getting into production. So on April 19th, by that time in March, April, by the time the government realized what was happening, we were already in the midst of wave 2, and there was a huge unexpected demand and a cry for vaccines. And that took them really by surprise. And on April 19th, the second phase of the vaccine policy started, where the government of India said that the states will be, the central government will only procure half the vaccine production. 50% of it will be procured by state governments in competition with private sector. The companies can to specify their own prices for the vaccines, and the government of India, however, will buy at 150 rupees a dose. Now, this was something so preposterous, because this is something that was clearly unsustainable. And they kept on saying that the state governments have the freedom to not only procure the vaccine by contacting these two manufacturers, but they could also go global if they so desired. Now, can you imagine a Mizoram and a Jharkhand giving a global tender? Do you even know what a global tender document looks like? Do they even know what a contract means? And the design was to have 30 of these states, and any municipality could also give a global tender the way the Bombay municipality gave. So it had become a joke. It was an absolute charade. And rightly enough, no state got any bids. I know Andhra gave a global tender. Maharashtra gave a global tender, extending the date 3-4 times. And so UP gave a global, but no bids came except Sputnik, which kept on sending 8, 9, 10 variations of the same tender. So that failed. And the idea was, of course, to deflect the blame on the states, to say the states are inefficient. What the states actually were demanding in the interactions the Prime Minister were that you decentralize the implementation to us, which is what it was in all our immunization programs. In the country's immunization programs that we've been running for the last few decades, the shared responsibility between the center and the state is that the center procures the entire vaccine, because then we get the market power, we have the bargaining chip, and we buy our vaccines at incredibly low prices. Incredibly low prices. You won't believe it if I told you what the prices are. Because we give an order for 1 billion doses. That's a huge market. So that was the reason. And then we have a thoroughly well laid out quality assurance systems. Every batch that is supplied to us by the supplier has to mandatorily go through a quality check, and then it is supplied to the states. The states get the schedule of when, what quantity will be supplied to them, and the guidelines will be given regarding the temperature in which the vaccine is to be stored, which are the priority groups that have to be vaccinated in the first instance, and so on and so forth. So in respect of those guidelines, the states then go ahead and implement. And the polio vaccine was a huge whole of the country approach, where every volunteer, where every section, starting from the President of India, was involved in. So that was the manner in which the polio pulse program. So that experience and that historical knowledge the ministry had, unfortunately, we didn't use it. So let me speed up. The next step came in when, since this was not sustainable, on June 7th, the policy once again revised. And now the central government has said they'll buy 75% of the production and 25% will be left to the private sector. Clearly, there were two objectives here. One, they wanted to cross-subsidize the pharma companies from incurring too many losses because they were buying it at 150 rupees. Though our information is that even 150, and according to other Poonawalla, gives normal profits. But nevertheless, they said they let them get some more money so that they are able to reinvest in their companies. And the second was to have the private sector take on some responsibility in immunization also. So this was the reason why they have this policy. But the clarity here that is lacking is 75% of what? Because the denominator of the production is not known. How much is being produced? And so 75% of that is what? And what happens if the paying capacity is not there and people don't line up? As we see today in the newspapers, that the slots are not getting booked in these private hospitals. Who are being able to buy these private sectors? Only 9 corporate chains. And now, of course, some more big hospitals have jumped in. But their ability to buy too much, invest on buying vaccines and sell, that market isn't probably there. And that's going to be a problem which they will come across. But, you know, for investing, for having, so to override that, the central government came up with one more caveat saying, we will give hospital-wise, facility-wise quota to each and state-wise quota of how much vaccine should go out of the 25% pool. So it's going to be enormously difficult for a central government to sit down and say this Geeta Nursing Home in Begumpet is going to get 200 vaccines and some other hospital will get 1,000 doses of vaccines, and then they can buy it directly from the manufacturer or they can buy it through my NHA. So these are all very complex arrangements which are not workable, and that has to be seen where it goes. So this is where we stand. Right now, we have vaccinated about 5% with doses, 5% of our population. We have a very long way to go, but the problem is not that we cannot implement. The demand side is there. And as you saw, 8 million people were vaccinated. I have always believed 100 million, that is 10 crores, 1 crore vaccines per day is very easy for us. We can do it. That's not a big thing. The problem is supply. And here, Pfizer and Moderna are being negotiated. Pfizer wants indemnity. They want complete waiver from any batch testing. They want waiver from bridging trials, and they want very light regulation on their product. So does the government give them such a free pass is yet to be seen. And Moderna has also asked, but what makes Moderna more attractive is that they've got a tie-up for technology transfer, which Pfizer is not doing. Moderna is willing to give the technology to Cipla, which is another outstanding pharma company. And Cipla is willing to put in $1 billion of investment, which is excellent. And therefore, because let's remember one thing, the vaccine we are producing in our country is old science. It's not advanced science. Advanced science is the mRNAs and the DNAs, and we don't have the capacity very much. So if Moderna were to transfer the technology to Cipla, India will be a gainer. So I think those kind of things, then you can trade these waivers. But why should Pfizer, just to sell their own product in our market, and we don't get technology transfer, we don't get any benefit? Why should we give? So that's a question that is being asked. So where Chinese vaccine and Russian Sputnik is coming into production, Reddy Labs are doing, they finished their trials. In July, they'll get into production, end of July. Zydus is a mRNA vaccine. They have said they'll be able to give 50 million doses between August and December. So I think with Genova and all these other companies coming into fruition, by end of December, I'm confident that we will have enough stock of vaccines. And I think if we can vaccinate every adult with 2 doses by March end or April, we should be happy. And just to go on shouting that we can do it in 2 weeks and 1 week and all that is absurd. And I think it's better to do a good, neat job and incentivize and invest much more on R&D and invest on our companies to play the global role that they are capable of will be a much better thing. On vaccine nationalism, I'd like to end. One is that, I think given India's poverty, India's poor health system, India's huge population, we have to be selfish. We have to take care of our citizens. We cannot have them die just because we want to give our vaccine to somebody else. I believe that. But then at the same time, I would say vaccine nationalism will also mean that we must invest much more money on becoming a little bit less vulnerable and more self-reliant on being able to manufacture even the other allied inputs that go into manufacture and not be so vulnerable to the US, which has banned all exports, and therefore we are struggling with the Novavax and the other vaccines. And the third point is, as a responsible country, we must contribute our bit to co-vaccine. To that extent, in terms of WHO and our commitments to it, that must at all costs be met with. I don't agree with the stand taken by the high-income countries not to give their bit to global community. I don't think that's a right and an ethical stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sujata. Now, may I invite Ish, Mr. Ish Kumar Sharma.
Yeah. Thanks, Professor Rama. Thanks, Madhurima, and really enlightening listening to Ms. Sujata and Professor Biswajit. I've been waiting actually for this. Very important topic actually, whenever we mention, especially in the current context, anything relating to India versus China is a very emotive issue. And I think this whole issue about, when it comes to, while we have a lot of questions when it comes to India in terms of the kind of coverage that are there, that is happening, the kind of data that is being shared, there is even more opaqueness when one looks at every aspect of China in some sense, because I think whether it's statistics relating to the vaccination itself or the lab leak investigations which are there, the status of that, to including the efficacy of the product. So a lot of questions are there, but if we for the moment look in terms of what has been already available in terms of what is talked about about China and its vaccines and its approach globally, and what we know from numbers from outside, as well as whatever little comes from there, is they have today at least 2 of their vaccines approved by WHO. They are able to also we have not had that. Hopefully we will get there with our Covaxin, hopefully at the earliest. And as Professor Rama pointed out, Chinese vaccines are now not just meeting domestic coverage, they're also kind of everywhere from Pakistan to Indonesia. Though there are questions now about the efficacy. In fact, recent reports are there. I was reading some media reports also saying that those countries which have depended on Chinese vaccines are now facing issue in terms of their efficacy. And though there are other elements also which Chinese government would want to propagate, which is essentially that some of these economies have opened the lockdowns much faster. So perhaps that also aided this, but then that's there. As far as domestic coverage is concerned, the aspect of domestic coverage, China, as we know, is actually has, unlike India, the system which China has, where people are more used to kind of complying with orders, in some sense, that perhaps adds to their favor. Second, I think if you look in terms of technology itself, I mean, India has that app, CoWIN app, on which we are kind of the scaffolding on which our whole technology platform for this actually hangs on, compared to the way they have deepened it with color-coded citizens, color-coded zones, whether you are, green or orange, and you remain orange till you actually get yourself tested. That kind of persuasion which is there in China. I mean, people move around with from what we gather, with their smartphones, ensuring that the color code on for them changes really. So that brings in some element of compliance, which I think is something where we are lacking. Third is, I think, the whole issue of this is happening. What is important to keep in mind is that all of this, the coverage in China, is happening despite China having had issues in the past with child immunization programs. There have been issues on quality which are there. Now also there are questions being raised on efficacy. Despite that, this increased coverage of domestic, they have almost covered, I think, 40% of the population, billion doses already done. Whereas we are talking about 280 or 300 perhaps, And in terms of stocks also, I mean, what Ms. Sujata referred to vaccinate at least 1 billion population by the end of the year, we will need at least 2 billion doses. How much have we procured so far? About 350 million. So we are a long way off in terms of doing it, and there is no clear visibility in terms of how we will go about with this. Yes, there is talk that we will get more vaccines. We will more orders have been placed. Say with serum, about 240 million doses orders have been placed. But at what price? Has that been agreed? The 150 rupees that they say, is there a clarity on that? Is Serum willing to do that? We have no clear idea on that. And these become questions in terms of, and we try and seek answers to this. At what price are you procuring? What is the kind of game plan? There is a detailed plan given out by the government from August to December, the kind of vaccines which will be entering India. At what price are this? What is the quantum? How much is being procured? From which company? How much is being procured? How is that to be distributed? How is that to be divided? There is still no clarity on that. And how do we go about this? The other issue is, which also Sujata ma'am referred to, is I think the issue of our own ability to withstand and not be dependent on outside influences when it comes to vaccine distribution, access, affordability. China has the strength of public sector vaccine manufacturing. They have state backing them. We had at one stage, but we know how we have let that pass, and that's we've seen the end of it. That being the case, then second is this whole exercise of manpower which is needed. This functioning manpower. We have ASHA workers, we have Anganwadi workers who have done an excellent job. But we are leveraging that infrastructure which we used for child immunization. 26 million babies added every year. That requirement of that cadre is different for when you want to vaccinate 1 billion people. So how do we strengthen this cadre? And China also has been able to do. Perhaps it has a more functioning cadre. We have As we have proven in the polio case, we can do if we want to. But today, if we want to leverage the same cadre and we want to expand this, there has to be in place, along with vaccine manufacturing, some measure to incentivize. The ASHA worker and the Anganwadi worker need to be incentivized in a manner that they go out to them, explain to them what is vaccine, why vaccination is important, why you need to get yourself vaccinated. So I think for that, maybe a financial backing or whatever that could be looked at, because it's a mammoth task, which I think we need to. And also, and this incidentally is happening at a time when in India, I think Professor Rama has written about this earlier also, we have steadily seen the health cadre actually dwindle. We had at some point of time, there used to be this lady health visitors, health inspectors, multi-purpose, block educators and all of that. Those we have. It varies from state to state. Those from Mizoram or Himachal is doing a better job than say Bihar and Uttar Pradesh for a reason, because I think the way they have invested in healthcare there. Then there is the other component when it comes to India's not being able to exceed and reach the coverage is also to do with some component of vaccine hesitancy. I know Mr. Anthony in the beginning said that vaccine hesitancy is not an issue really, but look at the healthcare workers are still not vaccinated in the country. They know vaccines and the importance of vaccines. If you look at Punjab, you look at some states in India, 40-50% of healthcare workers are still not vaccinated. How do we convey this point? Their peers need to be, need to explain this point on this to deal with this issue of hesitancy. Then, other than this, also when it comes to the other component which we need to, I think, keep in mind was in terms of number and the rates that we have. I mean, we began in terms of exports. So we started exporting to other countries and all. But if you look in terms of the way we have been vaccinating on a daily basis till June 21st. We almost used to vaccinate at a rate which was less than the daily production of serum, which was about 2.4 million doses a day. So there is no reason in terms of why we could not, given the way the strengths that we had today, other than mRNA technology, every other technology platform is in the works in India. So there is no reason why we could not have planned this better, done this better, rather than now telling Hopkins Institute you can manufacture Covaxin and other entities. We knew when the second wave was, that when the first wave ended, that we need to plan, we need to look in terms of how to expand our capacities. So I think those are the issues. And linked with that from a media perspective, since I'm a journalist, I also see the problem of poor communication. There are briefings being made that this is the pockets of news flow happening, that so many doses will be made available. But there is no clarity in terms of how granular the data is, what is happening. Today, for instance, if I want to know, out of the vaccination that we have done, 60 years and above, how many have been vaccinated? I'm sure it's a good number, but it's not very easy to find. So similarly, I think then there's a question at a district level. District level data availability and data interpretation. We need, as we have in India, every district has to have a surveillance officer and an epidemiologist. How have we empowered them? How are they able to take a decision? How is the data made available to them? We have questions on this only and nothing more than that really. And then the last point is about last minute decision making, which has been another problem when it comes to India. When we started vaccination on January 16th till 10th, there was, I don't remember the exact dates now, till the last minute, the orders were not placed in terms of, how much we were finding out. When are you placing the orders? What is the quantum of orders? What is happening? That is going on even till now. I mean, May, June, July orders. What about the other orders? So that, as well as also allowing newer players, whether measures to expand the vaccine portfolio also, even for drugs, when mucormycosis struck, then we looked in terms of which are the other companies which can start manufacturing. This is not for a country of India's size to be doing. So I think roughly I'll keep it to this, and if there's anything else I can take it forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think all three speakers have addressed the extremely complex, one, the global and the national terrain. It has talked about the importance of understanding global regimes, the whole question of vaccine nationalism. It has spoken about the capacities, the strengths, but the unutilized strengths, the policy paralysis, as I would call it, which Sujata explicated very well. And at sometimes I've used even the term that it's really been unethical in the way in which decisions have been delayed and, sort of suspended. And the lack of speak between the particular of the vaccination program with the health service system. And maybe Sujata can, in the discussion, also illuminate how, in a sense, the Ministry of Health has been rather disempowered. This is my view in this entire process. The Ministry of Health and the NCDC, which is the National Communicable Diseases Center, which should have been the pivotal points of all of the debates we are having today, that has somehow been disempowered. And we can probably take some of these issues up. And it is a fact that the Chinese have a very large market presence in the world today. They have large shares in Southeast Asia, in Pakistan, Middle East, Latin America, and also Africa. So these are all bilateral arrangements, and they have been expanding their market, including Brazil and all the controversies around that. So I'll just stop here, and I think we'll open the session for some questions. There are already some questions in the chat box, which I shall read out. What was the reason for India to involve itself with vaccine export drive when domestic needs are enormous? And the question that follows that is, as far as production of vaccine is concerned, does India have the capacity in terms of technology, raw materials, or skills to produce them at an enormous capacity? So I request the panelists to please take turns and answer this question.
Rama, shall I come on the first question on the export?
Please do, please.
Yeah. I think there are two factors, from whatever information I have, people and gathered. The two factors that led to this decision to export vaccines in the first place. The first was that, very early on, Serum Institute had actually promised 100 million doses a month. And, late last year, early January, this was what was being talked about. And the second, of course, was the considerable vaccine hesitancy with which we began. So here we had, I think there was those who were actually decision makers in the government looking at these two situations, that there's going to be a lot of supplies. 100 million doses is not a small thing. It's going to be coming in, and then we have vaccine hesitancy. Not everyone would come in. And in any case, the vaccine rollout, initially we only, we're rolling out to the frontline workers, etc. So this was a good, chunk of vaccines which was available that the government thought with which we could actually, help our neighbors and beyond, much more than that. Because if you look at the range of countries who have benefited from our exports is quite, quite impressive actually. The whole MEA list which is there. So that was the thing that. So I don't know why no one really went and looked at the capacities of serum carefully. No one in the government actually did that. If you go by the claims made by the CEO and then think that, this is what that company is capable of, this is what you end up doing. And then what really happened was not even half, or just about half of what was promised by Poonawalla was delivered. And then of course people also overcame the hesitancy and started coming on board. So that was the real issue. The second is, of course, we have already heard that India has capacities, and Sujata mentioned about this, that we have capacities in the old lines of production. In the new lines we don't have. But surely, there are ways in which we can get access to technology. She also alluded, I think she can elaborate on that.
Well, regarding the first part of the question, why did we get into that export drive? I see Suresh Goyal is here and Mr. Amod Kant. I mean, you have to ask these foreign wallahs. Why? Because the rumors was very clearly that India wanted to beat China, and in getting the international goodwill, and it was competing clearly with China, and that's why there was this huge pressure put on our vaccine manufacturers to give them those doses. Now that was the rumor. I don't know if I'm right or not. I think you should give a minute to them to clarify. But that's an interesting story if it is true. But having said that, I just think that they got into it also largely because of the complacency that had been set in. Honestly, I mean, today, I don't think today at this moment, we would ever export even one dose abroad, because we are really petrified after what we have gone through in wave 2, and we are petrified about wave 3. So that was psychologically, we were very comfortable. As far as production is concerned, yes and no, in the sense that Serum, as I said, has a huge capacity. They can manufacture. And I think if they're not delivering the promised goods, or they're not expanding, that's largely our fault. No manufacturer can take the risk of manufacturing stocks without a confirmed order. You have to have a confirmed order. Even as I speak today is June 23rd, India has only got confirmed orders for 820 million doses. That's all. 820 million doses is what it has secured. So, it has, we've still not given orders for 1.9 billion doses that we need for covering with 2 doses our 950 million population, which is above 18 years old. So, of course, to add it to this is Zydus 50 million, which will come in. Added to this is BioE, which is a Hyderabad-based company, which is now with an American university manufacturing a vaccine, which they're pricing at 200 rupees a dose. And Government of India has placed an advance purchase agreement with them for 300 million doses. But I don't think they'll be able to give you even 1 dose before November or December. When it comes to Covaxin and Bharat Biotech, everyone said, why don't we do compulsory licensing? And I was also in the forefront shouting. But what the problem there is, and Bharat Biotech got fed up of the criticism and offered the technology, is that their product, which is an inactivated vaccine, which means very carefully, you have to first grow the vaccine and then you have to kill it. And you have to ensure that each one is killed and not put a live vaccine in anybody. So it requires care, it requires skill, it requires a BSL 3, what is called a Biosafety Lab 3. We don't have many in our country. And therefore, we have mainly for monitoring and purposes. So Bharat Biotech is right now converting, they have 4 of them, they have 2 are in production, 1 in Bangalore, they're converting. It takes time to upgrade these laboratories. It takes about 2-3 months time to upgrade all these laboratories. Hafkin has been at it for the last 4 or 5 months. BBIL, that's another public sector, said they'll complete their work and maybe in August, September, they will be able to produce the Covaxin. So you see, if this thinking had gone in July last year, by another 4, 5, 6 months, we would have had this technology in 6, 7 laboratories in our country and been comfortably placed. But we didn't do that kind of forward thinking. and we didn't develop our BSL-3 laboratories. So that is the problem in terms of suddenly expanding production. Of course, we can do it, but then you have to give time.
Yeah, on the export part, I think there is also the component of, if you remember, when vaccination had started in January, Dr. V.K. Paul used to be on the news channels persuading people to actually come forward, take the vaccines. So vaccine hesitancy was there. Then there is also the component of, I don't know to what extent this will be true. There is also the element of the expiry. These vaccines expire. So if you have vaccine hesitancy and there is still doubt in terms of vaccine and you're not able to supply domestically, then export may be the only option. To Ms. Sujata's point about the expanding and making that the facilities which can BSL-3 type facilities, we had in our stimulus packages 900 crore was allocated for vaccine development. But if you look in terms of the breakup so far, I mean, much of it could have been used for that. I mean, 500 last count when we put out a story, which was about 500 crores was spent on that. But some of it could have gone into this, and it was the developments on Hafkin happened much later than that. So I think there was some thought on the way we planned it.
Thank you. I think Mr. Goel has his hand up. Would you like to come in? And then there are a couple more questions in the chat box.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, first of all, just to respond to what Sujata said, I'm going to leave the China part to my colleague Ashok Kant, who has been ambassador in China and much more capable of dealing with the China angle. But the other parts, I think, just my thoughts really. First of all, I think Adit Poonawalla, when he said that there were export commitments, I would actually like to trust him on this thing, that as a part of securing the supplies for making the vaccine here, certain amount of commitment to COVID, etc., might have been made, and therefore there were certain export commitments which may have been done. But besides the exports to which commitments may have already been made, there was also a part of India providing vaccine as a part of the international support to some African countries or other neighboring countries, as a part of our own, friendliness, goodwill gesture, etc., etc. So all that has happened. But I think the major problem that really happened was not because of exports or whatever small part we gifted to other countries, but because what Sujata mentioned, there was no advanced planning. We did not think of what we are going to need for more than 1.3, 1.4 billion people in the country over a period of time, how we are going to do this thing. There was no forward planning or purchase agreements. I remember I'm part of another group where we were discussing about, and we were thinking about India placing order for the Russian vaccine at that time. And there was a question whether Russian vaccine can be trusted or not trusted. And my point was, it's not a question of trusting. All that will happen later on. But for the time being, we need to secure supplies. So place the advanced orders as subject to their becoming effective or not, testing and all those things. We will purchase them. But planning for the purchase was very important, which we didn't do. And second thing, which actually is also my question really, is that, there are things. I live in Greater Noida. And I find in Greater Noida, when my son, who is 34, had to go for the vaccine, he did not have much difficulty in finding a vaccine in a private facility. Today, my domestic staff had gone to gyms to get the vaccine done. He was back within about half an hour, 45 minutes. He had no difficulty. So, is there actually a skewedness in distribution of vaccine to different states? That some states are getting more than what they actually need for vaccination. Some states are getting less. Is there that kind of a differential? That is one. And number two, door-to-door vaccination. there have been several suggestions that, like in the case of polio drops or other, I remember when I was a child, for smallpox, there were teams coming into the mohallas to do the vaccination. Can we adopt a strategy of door-to-door vaccination in this case, given the technical part of it? And one more point I wanted to make, I'm sorry, that we have not thought about how we are going to distribute the vaccines to the different sectors. We had more than 1 year to plan for this. But I think some extra planning should have been done in terms of how the vaccines are going to be distributed to the different states. Thank you very much. Those are my two questions. And I think after this, Ashok should come in terms of China. Thank you.
Mr. Kant, are you going to speak?
Is he there?
I'll leave it to experts to speak. No.
Okay. I think Dr. Partha Mukhopadhyay had questions specifically for Sujata and Biswajit. Would you like to come in?
Yeah. Can I go first?
Okay, you've read the question. Okay,
I read the question. Yes. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yes. On the Covaxin IP, I think many of us have been arguing that Covaxin was developed, with taxpayers' money, and the technology should have been in the public domain. And they should have been, we've seen Hafkin getting the technology for producing Covaxin. But this should have been distributed, or the technology should have been made available to whoever was willing to produce this vaccine long back. So this whole talk about IP on publicly funded technology, is just patently absurd. To just say that, because all over the world, and especially in the US, there's been a lot of discussion around the COVID vaccines, and many of the civil society organizations have been saying that the Moderna vaccine, for instance, should have actually been called the people's vaccine, the kind of federal funding that went into it. So I think along with this whole issue that we must flag now, there are a lot of things that we have to start from virtually the first principles that we're talking about, the health technology, etc. That of course a lot of public funding goes into development of the technologies, medical products like medicines and vaccines all over the world. And the kind of problem that we have been seeing in terms of access to these technologies, it's simply absurd that this kind of IP regime should be applicable to the this publicly funded technology. So I think there should be a major concern expressed, and some significant steps taken by academics. And I don't think policymakers will do that, because they have the commitment to look after the the business interests as well. But I think we have the responsibility to do that, and therefore since we are not making the Covaxin IP available and putting in public domain, obviously our WTO proposal looks again there is the contradiction that is there, and we've been pointing out from day one. And vaccine Maitri did backfire. I have no hesitancy in saying that, because I was just looking at the dates on which the last exports took place. That was on 16th of April. So the last bunch of exports took place from India, and that was exactly the time when the second wave was peaking. So when when we found that our situation was absolutely had gone out of control, and we needed to take these extra steps to respond to the challenges, we stopped exports of vaccines, and we did it to such an extent that we even overlooked our commitments to COVAX. Now, I think that is completely unacceptable. I think this is not, this is not nothing to do with that vaccine nationalism. Is to do with we being part of the global community, and when we are making a certain amount of commitment, we must fulfill that commitment. And so that's what. Say thank you.
Sujata, I think there are a couple of questions for you.
Well, on BBIL, my information is that they're manufacturing and Covaxin. Bharat Biotech is very actively engaged with giving them the technology to both BBIL and to immunologicals and to Hafkin to manufacture the product, not to fill and finish. But if you have better information, I'll have to check it up again. But that's the impression I had. And BBIL, I was listening to the MD's interview the other day, and I think they're also working on independently on a vaccine of their own. So they are quite actively involved in this whole process. As for of course, export, I think, as I said, I would rather constrain myself on that. On compulsory licensing, there's a question, Rama, on the positive, negative aspects of compulsory licensing. I would just like to say that, see, compulsory licensing is something that the IPR allows national governments to impose in national emergencies. So as has been said earlier by Mr. Bhatt, what better example of a national emergency than this? So initially we did think that since Bharat Biotech was manufacturing an indigenous product with government investment, it was so much easier for them to declare compulsory licensing. All they have to do is to pay a small royalty for the amount that Bharat Biotech might have invested. At that time, Krishna Ella in one interview said he had invested 350 crores. So you negotiate a royalty, take the technology, and really have about 6 to 8 companies of the country to manufacture that product at a price that is dictated by you. That means now the product becomes, the owner is the government of India. That we did not do. And we did not do it largely because the compulsory licensing is not only for Bharat Biotech, it is for all licensed products within the country. So that could even have extended to serum. By paying a royalty, could have taken their technology as well. So the fear, I think, that the government of India had was if they put that measure here, then they may not be able to get people to come and give their technology from outside, and they'll be afraid to come. Even though United States had given them an assurance that they will not stand in the way if they were going to impose a compulsory license. If you remember in the case of HIV drugs, when Thailand wanted to invoke the compulsory license, United States imposed sanctions against them. So US stand is very important on this issue of invoking any clauses that the IPR gives us. So that assurance was also given, but even then, for reasons best known to the government of India, they did not impose compulsory license. In fact, they have been rather farmer friendly, if you ask me. So that's my take on that.
Rama, I just wanted to, just on the compulsory licensing issue, and then Sujata made an important point about the US position. In fact, US does this annual review of IP laws of partner countries, all the countries around the world. There is a special 301 report. And the very interesting part of this year's 301 report, which was, which was unveiled 2 months back, is that US says that it is, it's first time ever US has said that it is the right of countries to use compulsory license for public health purposes. Now that's a complete 180 degrees. And therefore it sounds, when US comes and says, gives you that kind of an assurance, a written assurance that, countries can freely use compulsory license. I was was completely confused when there were reports coming from the government saying that, look, the government is involved in very delicate negotiations in the international forums. So we are not going to be using compulsory license. So I found it very surprising, and this precisely because of the position of the very extreme, complete change position of the US, which has been the most vociferous opponent of compulsory license. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
I'd like Ish we have about 5 minutes. Ish, can you please, there are 2 questions for you, I think, in the chat box. Please unmute.
Yeah. On the one quick point, actually, on this compulsory license also, there is also the component of Professor Biswajit. There's also the component of, I think, not just the technology transfer, handling this complex technologies also. I think if there can be some provision which can look into that aspect also, isn't it?
No. See, what you look, we can discuss it bilaterally, I think, later, because I think we have to explain that.
Yeah.
Because whenever compulsory licensing has been used, for instance, when you used it, the one time that we used compulsory licensing in India, NATCO was given the compulsory license. There was no problem in producing that product in the country.
Yeah. Okay. I think I see one, which is the question there. I think. Not able to see the question, I think. Yeah. So I think.
Hello.
Rama,
Hello?
you have to unmute yourself.
So sorry. The chairperson, Dr. Arora, assured that there won't be any issue regarding availability of vaccines. We will have around 20 to 22 crore doses next month. Do we have any idea where this is coming from?
Only you have to ring him up and ask him. Because nobody knows.
No,
Okay. Now, can I raise a technical point? See,
yes, please.
the compulsory licensing and voluntary licensing, there is a difference between that. Compulsory licensing can be applied when a patented drug or technology from outside, if it is marketed in India with Indian government's permission, and they have to meet 4 or 5 clauses on that. 5 clauses are to be met, and those clauses, if they are not met over a period of years, then we can exercise compulsory licensing. The clauses are: it meets the need of that country in which it is marketed. It must be available at an affordable price. Third, there should be a technology transfer and capacity building in production of it. And none of the drugs as it is cannot be imported, but it can be formulated in this drug. If these conditions are not met over a period, and that's the reason why NATCO got that compulsory licensing against Bayer in sorafenib drug. So that's the first time India used it. Now here, the only vaccine out of this patented is only if the question comes, only if Moderna or Pfizer vaccine is sold in India. Under that we can, and if they don't meet this condition. But that question hasn't arisen. They haven't even asked for license, and they have not even started marketing it. The only drug which has got within our capacity is Covaxin. Covaxin is Indian produced, but it still hasn't applied for a patent and its own. It is only licensed to sell.
No, this is not right.
You're wrong.
You're wrong.
If that is the case, if Covaxin is given patent and not just a license to sell in India, in that case, who after a producer, a competent producer, should apply for a compulsory licensing, and which company has come forward with a proven capacity to produce? It is the whole. That is very.
No. Can I just clarify? Yeah. Can I clarify?
Yes.
You don't see there are 2 sections in the Patents Act.
Yes.
Section 92 and Section 100. Yes. And you don't have to wait the government can actually issue compulsory license without waiting for those, without killing, sort of beating those conditions. See, the normal compulsory license can be given only after 3 years, after the patent is granted. But those can be granted, and we ensured, and there was a lot of civil society work that went into the thing before the Patent Act was amended. So we have these two very powerful provisions, and if you go back and sort of read the discussions on when the patent the amendment took place, and Murasali Maran, who was the commerce minister at that time, commerce industry minister, he specifically said that we are empowering ourselves by giving us these two extremely strong provisions, which will be used in case of epidemics. He didn't know, he didn't realize at that time we were going to have a pandemic. So there are a lot of misconceptions going around on compulsory license, that all those conditions have to be met. You have to wait for 3 years before the grant, after the grant of license and all. Government use is possible, and also, Section 92 can be used.
I'm afraid we're running out of time, and I'll really have to sort of wind up. I'm not going to summarize. I think the three panelists have really opened up the issue and the complexities that surround these issues. The China aspect, the only thing I want to say is that, you see, China loves to be hated by the world community. And I think that when we look at China today, there is a lot of areas where business is going on as usual between the US and China. The old collaborations, which were scientific and academic collaborations built over years, are going on, and pharma will do business when it feels it is required and necessary. But meanwhile, the Chinese are going ahead, and I think they will continue to do so. So let's not write China off. China is going to be very much there, and very much a force to contend with. So I will end the webinar now, and I really want to thank Biswajit, Sujata, and Ish for agreeing to come on to this webinar, and we hope that we will be able to write this up apart from the recording that will be available for people to view. We'll come back to you on that. And may I request Madhu, if she has any last words, to please.
No, none at all. I would also like to thank all the speakers, panelists here. It was a really interesting discussion. And we will, if we can write up a paper on this, that would be good. I mean, we'll get to transcribe and probably get back to all the panelists here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.